The key to successful relationships is to appreciate that not always does truth lie in my mind. Sometimes truth lies in your mind. All too often we tend to think that it has to be my way or the highway. But the hard fact is, when it's in the context of business or whether it's in the context of marriage, we are teammates, we are soulmates, and therefore we have to be open to each other's perspectives. Nowhere is that summed up more beautifully than in the actual Sheva brachas, the 7 blessings that are recited at a chuppah, at a marriage, where one blessing ends with the words Mesameach Chasan V'chala, rejoicing the bride, the groom and the bride, and the other blessing ends Mesameach Chasan Im Hakala, rejoicing the groom with the bride. In the first instance, rejoicing the groom and the bride means that it's his perspective that is embraced, and then by extension from him over to her, rejoicing the groom and the bride. She accepts his perspective, his way, if you will. The second blessing ends, Mesameach Chasan Im Hakala, rejoicing the groom with the bride. In other words, it's initially with the bride. It's her perspective, and then the groom together with the bride. The real success in any relationship is acknowledging the fact, as in the words of our sages, is in the same way no two people look alike, so too no two people think alike. And invariably, I have to accept the fact that sometimes the answer lies more so in your mind. Sometimes the answer may lie so more in my mind. And we have to have this selfless approach and attitude to whatever it is that we're tackling together. And then with our combined approaches, we'll ultimately achieve the success that we're looking for in whatever it is that we're aspiring to. That works in the context of relationships. That works in the context of business. Any team builder will tell you that every individual party is critical to the overall sum total of the success that the company is looking to achieve. And in a very similar vein, in the context of relationships, happy couples will tell you that when they're open to each other's perspectives, that's the way they ultimately achieve bliss and unity together. Ultimately, out of the many, one. The greatest impediment to any successful relationship is ego. It's the argument that it has to be my way, where you're not open to another person's perspective. There's that old Jewish joke they tell about the groom who's dating, the man who's dating his girlfriend, and after speaking of an hour of himself, he suddenly realizes, and so I'm sorry, I've spoken so much about myself, why don't we take out a little bit of time for you to tell me what you think about me? And the real point in this context is that it's not always about you. It has to be, and you have to appreciate that it's very much about the other person as well. Both, again, in the context of business or in the context of marriage or in any other relationship. To be a true friend, to be a true teammate, to be a true soulmate, you have to appreciate the fact that there's more than one party involved over here, and you have to be open to one another. And that has to come from a selfless perspective from both ends. You know, people often say in the context of marriage that marriage is a give and take relationship. That's fundamentally flawed, because I'm going to be giving, but often I'll also be focused on what I'm taking. And if I feel that what I'm taking is not commensurate with what I'm actually giving, then at some point I'm going to be inclined to want to stop giving. Real success is understanding that marriage is a give and give relationship, where I concentrate entirely on what I'm giving without concerning myself of what I may be receiving in return. And when both parties conduct themselves in that same framework, then invariably they're both going to be receiving as well, albeit in an entirely selfless framework. And to extend that in the broader context of how when you offend somebody, you invariably apologize. There was this video that was going viral on social network where the young man turns to his father and says, "Dad, I want to get married." And the father says, "Son, first apologize." And he says, "But Dad, I did nothing wrong. I just telling you I want to get married." "Son, but first apologize." And so it repeated itself numerous times over. Finally, he said, "Okay, Dad, I'm sorry." And the father said, "Okay, good. Now you're ready to get married." Now, whilst there is some truism to that, and one has to be prepared to apologize and to, again, put aside the ego, which serves as the great impediment, there's a certain flaw in that parable as well, in the sense that, why am I apologizing? Am I apologizing because I truly feel sorry for what I will have done? Or am I apologizing purely because I don't like the tense atmosphere that has been created as a result of my offense? If it's the latter, then I'm only apologizing because I want to just put pay to the tension of the moment. But I don't genuinely feel sorry, and at some point, I'm going to repeat the offense all over again. It's the same way in my relationship with God. To achieve success in my relationship with God, people turn up to Shul on Yom Kippur and they express their sorrow. But why? Because they're genuinely sorry for what they did wrong, or because they're hedging their bets? My life lies in the balance, so I might as well say sorry right now, albeit that if I survive Yom Kippur, I'm going to go back and repeat the offense all over again. Put aside your ego, acknowledge the other individual, be prepared to recognize when you yourself do wrong, open up to express your remorse, be open to one another, give and give, don't worry about the taking, and you will have real success, and you'll do away with whatever impediments might otherwise typically, and sadly, all too often, get in the way of successful relationships.
What if I were to tell you that you could completely change your relationship with your spouse without expecting a thing from him in return? You're going to roll your eyes and say, here we go again, it's all up to me. But it's neither unfair nor unreasonable. It's actually a very empowering perspective, because it means that you can do something on your own and not have to expect change from somebody else. Marriage, the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said, is not about educating and changing one's spouse. It's about fostering a relationship based on respect for your spouse's outlook on life and for his or her personal opinions. Okay, fine. Respect. But easier said than done, right? And isn't it a two-way street anyway? And is that it? How about love? And what about the impossibly complex dynamic of making a family with conflicting perspectives, his and mine, on our different backgrounds in a world that seems hopelessly polarized between the practical and the romantic, between the real and the ideal? I actually remember once during a very challenging time in my life feeling really helpless and picking up a book of the Rebbe's writings. And it said that a single individual who devotes his heart, his mind, and his soul to studying and teaching the truth of Torah can accomplish wonders, affecting even a large city and influencing all that city's affairs. So I thought to myself, wow, if one person can do that in a city, I can do that in a family, right? In our longing for intimacy with our husbands, we compete with all kinds of other things, bills, iPhones, football games, and we who are the mothers of all living things need to learn that we need to open our hands and our heart and give everything regardless. Thankfully, our husbands are receptive to us when we adopt those kind of attitudes, and that's where the changes are able to begin. How do we do it? The first thing is that we need to believe and to understand that there is nothing in the entire world that's more important than establishing and maintaining a healthy marriage. Second step, we need to take full responsibility for the things that we can change in our own attitude and our own expectations and behavior without demanding or expecting changes from our spouse. The tools that are at our disposal really are found in three different toolboxes: speech, thought, and action. So we can replace divisive or critical thoughts with positive thoughts, paying attention to the things that we can appreciate. We can speak more respectfully, we can listen more empathetically, and we can go out of our way to perform acts of kindness without keeping score or expecting anything in return. Because the truth is that with practice and commitment, we can cultivate a marital bond that says very clearly, honey, there's no place that I end and you begin. This positive, healthy marriage is our tikkun, it's our rectification, our transformation, it's our prescription for transformation in our emotional health. But even the most highly evolved couples have to stretch beyond their comfort zone to build a good marriage. It takes work, sustainable and continuous. Success in marriage, like in any other venture, is 5% inspiration and 95% perspiration. Rabbi Azriel Tauber points out a certain symbolism in connection with a diamond. He says that when you see a diamond, which is our symbol of love forever, diamonds are, that when you see a diamond in its natural state, it's not beautiful. But when tons and tons of pressure are applied to it, and in combination with high-speed friction from the polisher, the gem becomes brilliant and it becomes beautiful. In our marriages, we also find ourselves in situations where a lot of pressure is placed upon us. And there's a lot of friction, whether we invite it or not. The empty space within the circle of the ring symbolizes that which is unknown, that which a couple must commit themselves to unconditionally in order to overcome that friction and to make it work. Creating a successful marriage begins with what we do and with what we don't do and what we don't say. There's a Talmudic dictum that says that we should refrain from doing to anybody else what we would not want them to do to us. It takes refinement and a lot of self-control to hold ourselves back from making judgmental or sarcastic comments. For example, reminding our spouses of what they did or didn't do wrong is tough. Our positive and personal and purposeful actions are going to be the vitamins that keep our relationships healthy. And like vitamins, which are most effective when taken regularly, we would be wise to develop rituals, precise behaviors that are performed at very specific times, that are motivated by very deeply held values to help our relationships flourish. Let's think about that. Much of our relationship with our Creator is based on rituals. We have moments that we take out every day that are prescribed times for prayer or for putting on tefillin. Top athletes have rituals. They know that at specific hours during each day, they're on the field or they're in the gym doing their routine workout. For almost every one of us, brushing our teeth is a daily ritual. Where it doesn't necessitate, deep powers of concentration. What rituals would make you and your spouse happier? Are there meaningful activities that you've neglected to engage in that would improve your marital bond? Once you discover the rituals that you want to implement, so write them in a planner and get started. New rituals are generally difficult to initiate, but over time, usually within 30 days, according to the Shulchan Aruch, performing these rituals can become as routine as brushing our teeth. And each small incremental step will just unleash a bunch of positive feelings and help you to keep growing in other areas as well. Habits are difficult to change, but on the other hand, that very resistance becomes an advantage when we're dealing with good habits. In fact, Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but rather a habit. And so a few suggestions. Make eye contact when your mate is talking. Stop whatever you are doing and listen, and resist the impulse to interrupt. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits, who I quote quite often, always says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Learn to become a more empathetic listener. Show your soulmate that you really heard completely what he was saying by repeating it in your own words and then saying, is that what you were trying to say to me? Did I get it? Don't allow the Facebook or the smartphone or the computer to compete with your spouse for your attention. Life moves really quickly, and we really have to work hard to create quality time. Daily and monthly, on vacation or during staycations, go out together. Go out for lunch, go out for breakfast, and turn off the phone. Mornings, I think, are preferable to evening excursions if you can do it, because in the morning you're rested and fresh and you're not so grumpy. Take a walk in nature together once a month. Collaborate and make a list of things that you'd like to do together. I don't know, go horseback riding, swim with the dolphins, The Rebbe said that the daily time that he allotted to speaking with his wife was as non-negotiable to him as putting on tefillin. It can be really valuable to get together on Saturday night or Sunday morning and plan your week together. Although it would be perfectly fine while making such plans to throw in, some very practical appointments and to-dos, it may prove far more significant to devote time each week to taking steps towards accomplishing your shared goals in life. Your goals are dreams with a deadline. Not buying shoes, not going to Home Depot. Your shared goals are the pillars on which your marriage rests, so don't put them on a back burner and forget about them.
This week I received a question from a young man who wanted to know, is there an exercise that he and his wife can do to assure that they'll have a better marriage? And I like to actually provide for you what I call the ultimate exercise, that I predict and I believe that if couples would do this for 5 to 10 minutes a day, I guarantee them a better relationship. So what would be this ultimate exercise? Well, there's really 3 basic steps to creating this type of environment in your home and having a more successful marriage. The first one is, and most importantly, I want couples to turn off their cell phones for 5-10 minutes a day, to turn towards one another. Instead of looking away from one another, which most people do, they're either looking at their cell phone or surfing the internet or talking to somebody on their phone or busy reading something. I want a couple to start by turning everything off and by turning towards one another. In my office, when I have couples do this, I actually turn their chairs towards one another and have them look at each other. And just that alone will start create an environment of deeper connection where there's no more distraction, just the other person. They're actually focusing on one another. That's step number 2. Step number 1. Step number 2 is to learn how to use an I message. An I message is letter I versus a U message, or Y a U message. What is the power of an I message? An I message is when you express what you're feeling. You say what I'm feeling like. And I'm feeling, for example, an I message could be I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling I don't measure up to your expectations, I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling helpless. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to pick an I message. Think about your day, think about what's going on at work, think about what's going on in the home, and use an I message with the other person. Instead of blaming the other person, say, I'm feeling a bit scared, or I'm feeling a bit helpless today. Now, that's really good, because if you do that, you're changing the whole environment from competing for what I want, from fighting for what I want, into expressing in a very gentle way what I'm experiencing. And when you do that, you're also increasing your attachment, because attachment is really about getting to know what the person is feeling like inside, feeling deeply inside. It's getting to know what their mood is about. It's getting to know what their stresses are all about. It's getting to know about what they're struggling about. When you use an I message, you're actually sharing with the other person a more intimate side, a more vulnerable side of who you are, and allowing them to connect to who you really are. Instead of fighting about a lot of the things which people fight about money, about kids, about in-laws, it's very important to change all that in a relationship and focus more on your vulnerability, what you're experiencing. And just think about the purpose of marriage. What greater present can you give somebody than expressing to them your vulnerable side and them listening to your vulnerable side? There's nothing greater than that in this world. There's no greater feeling than that in this world when you actually turn towards another human being and pour out some of the things that you're feeling. And a marriage can allow you to do that, but only when you're sitting down and facing one another and beginning to express what you're actually experiencing. The second part of the I message is to really validate what the other person is saying. So when a person says, I'm feeling really scared, so what you need to do is kind of just simply reflect back to them to validate them and say, I hear that you're feeling really scared. Now, I know that might sound a bit robotic, or you're just kind of parenting. I like you to instead do that with your own words, with a lot of nuance, with a little sophistication. When a person says, I'm really scared about losing my job, say, it must be really hard thinking that you're losing your job. You must be really struggling with that. Now, that brief interchange builds tremendous resilience in the relationship. So when you listen to the other person, you validate them. You're giving them a present as well. You're giving them the present of your presence. You're giving them the opportunity to turn towards someone, and that somebody could actually listen deeply. You ever had that feeling when you're growing up that no one listens to you in life? And did you also ever have that feeling of that positive memory of somebody that really listened to you, that made you feel really good about yourself? It's the exact same thing in marriage. Marriage can either be a place where you are turning away from one another and feeling disappointed, or marriage can be this wonderful opportunity to validate somebody, to let a person express that I message and validate them and let them feel deeply, deeply heard by you. And the third part, which will conclude this exercise, is really just thanking the other person for spending time listening to them. Thanking the other person will now solidify that exercise that you just did. You can also express, when you're thanking them, the ways in which that made you feel good. Like just simply saying, it really felt nice when we talk like this. I really appreciate when you spend time listening to me. I feel it makes us much closer when I have somebody to turn towards in my life. That I feel there's somebody else out there in the world that really just cares about me. It makes me feel so good when you listen. And I really look forward to the next time. What you're doing by saying those words is you're kind of just reinforcing the positive experience you've just had. And then ultimately you want to then just request, you look forward to having it the next night or tomorrow or a few minutes from now. Let's do this again. It feels so good. You want to thank them for doing it with you, and then you want to just request that you look forward to doing it in the near future. So again, a very simple exercise. If you do this, I guarantee you more happiness and pleasure in your relationship. You turn towards one another. You turn off all your devices, no distractions. You can do this every night. No phones, no internet, no radio, no videos, nothing else around you. You then start and you turn towards one another with your chairs so your body language is connected and focused on the other person. You then start using I messages. I want you to talk about something that you're feeling like inside, whether you're sad or scared or stressed. And I want the other person to just listen to you and validate you without correcting you. And third, I want you to, at the end of both trying this, I want you to thank the other person for giving the opportunity to experience this close connection with you. And I believe if you do all these 3 steps, try it every night, as much as you can, you'll experience more pleasure in your relationship, and I guarantee you more happiness for the rest of your lives.
A happy marriage is a marriage where you get your fulfillment, your satisfaction, and your pleasure from serving the other. If you go into the marriage thinking it's going to do wonders for you, that's a bit selfish, not quite idealistic enough for marriage. Marriage means you're going to be there for someone else, and your thoughts are, what can I do for the well-being or the happiness of my spouse? If that's your orientation, if that's your thinking, then the marriage will be a healthy one and a happy one. The real secret is the dynamic of mashpia and mekabel, the giver and the receiver. When the man is focused on giving himself, providing, and that's his pleasure, and the woman is focused on receiving and nurturing without reservation, without holding back, that is the dynamic of marriage, giving and receiving. Not give and take. There's no taking. Taking is abusive. But when there's a giving and a receiving, that is a very powerful union. It unites them, they become one, and they never feel alone in the world. That's a good marriage. In the marriage dynamic, the man is the giver, the provider. A frustrated man is someone who gives, but what he gives is not accepted or received properly. It's like a comedian telling jokes and nobody laughs. It can be very frustrating. What women need to know about men is that men are very sensitive because in being the giver, you are completely dependent on the receiver to make what you give valid. So if the woman does not appreciate or accept what he's giving and makes conditions like, don't give me that, give me something else, or don't give it this way, give it some other way, or that's not what I want, that's not what I need, it frustrates the masculine instinct of the man, and they withdraw and just give up. It is not because a woman can't do things that she needs a husband to do it for her. The wife appreciates what the man does for her, even if she could do it herself, because he gets his fulfillment and pleasure from being of service, from doing for her, and the more she appreciates it, the more of a man he can be. A woman wants her husband to be her hero. She wants to be able to lean on him. And no matter how capable and no matter how intelligent, no matter how brave a woman is, she needs to have her husband there to be her stability, her rock, so that if there is a crisis, when there's a crisis, she knows she can rely on him, that he will be there. Men today think of wives like partners, 50-50, which almost sounds like, I'll be 50% male, you be 50% male, I'll be 50% female, you be 50% female. That's not how it works. If a woman can't be 100% female, and if a man is not 100% male, they're both frustrated. It just doesn't work. So, what a man should know about a woman is she doesn't need you to be her partner. She needs you to be her husband. So, take that role, allow her to be a woman, and you'll both be a lot happier. One of the big causes of strife in a marriage is the mistaken role of love in the relationship. People get married looking for love, and that's really a big mistake. In the last 80 years, 100 years, every marriage was out of love. Unlike back in Anatevka, in the time of Tevye, when love was not the big issue. So in these years, have marriages become stronger and deeper and more fulfilling? The opposite. Because love cannot create a relationship. Love is the spice. Love is the icing on the cake. It can't be the cake. So if people are looking for love, getting married out of love, there's going to be disappointment. And so many times you hear people say, we got divorced because we fell out of love. And if there's no love, there's no you, which tells you something. Were you married to the person or were you married to the love? Because if you were married to the person and the love somehow slipped away, well, you still have the person. Why are you getting divorced? If you get divorced because the love left, then obviously you were married to the love. And that's not kosher. It's not any better than being married to the money. So if a man wants to marry a woman for her money, everybody would agree that that's a bad idea. Marrying someone for love is not any better. It's a condition, it's a thing, and you're married to that thing and not to the person you're supposed to be married to. So love is actually destroying marriages. So a couple come and say, we're in love, we want to get married. So, well, you already have the love, why are you getting married? If you're marrying for love and you already love, what are you getting married for? It turns into a monstrosity. Like, let's get married so that we'll be stuck with each other even if we don't love each other. What kind of statement is that? So you get married for the sake of marriage because you believe in it, because it's a wonderful institution, because it's holy, because it's divine, because it's the way it was meant to be. And then you try to love each other to make it more pleasant. But you don't marry love. It's a big mistake.